James Walker had always dreamed of a quiet life away from the chaos of San Francisco. After 12 years grinding away as a software engineer, he finally saved enough to purchase his dream home, a charming, century-old colonial tucked away in the peaceful Westbrook Estates. The house came with a spacious backyard that bordered a serene public park, a perfect space for the vegetable garden and meditation area he had always wanted. The real estate agent had mentioned an HOA but downplayed their involvement, assuring James they were more concerned with maintaining property values than interfering with homeowners' rights. Caught up in the charm of the home, James skimmed through the HOA contract, focusing mostly on the financial obligations. The monthly dues seemed reasonable. Without a second thought, he signed the papers, packed his belongings, and moved into what he thought was his slice of paradise. For the first few months, life was blissful. James renovated the interior and meticulously planned his garden, feeling content in his new sanctuary. But that tranquility shattered one March morning when the sound of trucks and shouting jolted him from his work. Curious and concerned, James rushed outside and was met with an unbelievable sight. 12 workers erecting a metal fence around the backyard of his home. Standing at the center of the commotion was Elizabeth Blackwell, the HOA president. With her sharp features, icy blue eyes, and perfectly styled bob haircut, Elizabeth radiated authority and smug satisfaction. Hands on hips, she stared at James with a condescending smile. "Community property, my friend," she announced. "You should have read the contract more carefully before signing." James's heart pounded as he demanded an explanation. Elizabeth calmly produced a folder containing what she claimed was the official community map, pointing out a section labeled as common property. According to her, the backyard James believed he owned was earmarked for community use. "This area has always been designated common property for Westbrook Estates residents," Elizabeth stated, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "It's all in Section 12, Paragraph 4 of your agreement." James, stunned, ran back inside to retrieve his copy of the contract. Frantically flipping through the pages, he found the section about common areas but noted how vague the language was, no explicit mention of his backyard. When he returned to confront Elizabeth, she shifted from polite to openly hostile. "The HOA board has unanimously interpreted the language to include this parcel," she declared. "The fence installation is fully permitted and approved. Interfere again, and I'll report you for disrupting community improvements." Feeling helpless, James watched as the workers resumed hammering fence posts into what he was certain was his property. Elizabeth oversaw the operation like a military commander, casting smug glances his way. By evening, the 5-foot metal fence stood completed, adorned with signs that read, "Private area, HOA members only." James felt violated, enraged, and powerless. That night, sleep eluded him as he replayed the confrontation in his mind, filled with regret over what he hadn't said or done. Around 2 in the morning, driven by desperation, he descended into the musty basement to search for any documents that might help his case. The space was cluttered with boxes and old furniture left by the previous owner. While moving a small bookcase, James noticed something peculiar, an odd pattern in the stone foundation behind it. Upon closer inspection, he discovered faint seams outlining a hidden door. His fingers traced the edges until he found a nearly invisible latch. With a gentle push and lateral pressure, the heavy stone door creaked open, revealing a narrow tunnel shrouded in darkness. The cool, earthy air pouring from the passage carried the distinct scent of history-damp soil and aged timber. The tunnel, framed with sturdy oak beams, was about 5 feet high and 3 feet wide, forcing James to crouch as he ventured inside. The walls bore the remnants of candle brackets, and the floor alternated between packed earth and weathered wooden planks. Driven by curiosity, James followed the tunnel deeper beneath the earth. The passage stretched for nearly 50 yards before sloping upward toward a trapdoor disguised as a landscaping rock. Carefully lifting it, James emerged on the other side of the newly built fence back in the very backyard that Elizabeth claimed no longer belonged to him. But that wasn't the only discovery. A large sign planted in the ground read, "Coming soon. Exclusive HOA members recreation area, private pool, and pavilion." Rage surged through James as the truth became clear. Elizabeth and her allies weren't just stealing his land for a community space, they planned to build a luxury facility benefiting only select residents. Determined to fight back, James returned to the tunnel and began devising his plan. Over the following days, he immersed himself in local history, digging through archives and old property records at the library. There, he met Dorothy Thompson, the local historian who shared the colorful past of the Mason estate, the original name of James's property. Joseph Mason, a businessman turned bootlegger during Prohibition, had constructed hidden tunnels beneath the house for smuggling liquor. Dorothy provided James with maps and survey documents that confirmed what he suspected. The parcel Elizabeth claimed as community property was never officially subdivided. The original deed, still intact, listed the backyard as part of the estate. Armed with this knowledge, James sought advice from Frank Martinez, a retired attorney and neighbor. Reviewing the documents, Frank confirmed the legitimacy of James's claim but warned him about Elizabeth's political connections. She had influence over city officials and a reputation for playing dirty. This won't be a quick legal battle, Frank cautioned. But if you expose her scheme publicly, you might win in the court of public opinion. James knew he needed proof. Using the tunnel, he installed hidden cameras around the fenced area, capturing footage of construction violations, conversations about corner cutting, and even bribery between Elizabeth, William Sullivan the contractor, and a corrupt building inspector. Piece by piece, James built his case, enlisting the help of Sarah Parker, the HOA secretary, who confirmed the board had forged community maps and fabricated approvals. Together, they gathered internal emails, falsified votes, and records of HOA funds being misused for personal expenses. As the evidence mounted, James formulated a plan to reveal the corruption at the upcoming HOA meeting while simultaneously tipping off Emily Wright, an investigative journalist. At the same time, he secured an independent city inspector to conduct a surprise site visit, bypassing the compromised local officials. On the day of the groundbreaking ceremony, James played the part of the compliant homeowner, feigning interest in Elizabeth's grand vision. But as the inspector arrived, followed closely by Emily Wright and her photographer, the facade crumbled. Elizabeth's smugness evaporated as the inspector demanded permits that William couldn't produce. Emily confronted Elizabeth with the allegations, and when Elizabeth tried to deny everything, James unveiled the damning footage he'd collected. Back at the emergency HOA meeting, Sarah, supported by Jennifer Hudson and Frank Martinez, presented the full scope of the scandal to stunned homeowners. Elizabeth and William's grip on the community shattered as residents voted overwhelmingly to remove them from the board. The legal fallout was swift and unforgiving. Elizabeth faced civil suits and criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and corruption. William's company collapsed under the weight of the investigation, and the bribed inspector lost his license. But the story didn't end with punishment. Under new leadership, the HOA reformed its policies, emphasizing transparency and homeowner rights. The stolen land was returned to James, and together with the community, he transformed it into a public Gardena shared space for all residents. The once hidden tunnel became a historical landmark, its story repurposed as a symbol of justice rather than secrecy. James's battle against corruption, born from a quiet love of gardening, grew into a nationwide movement advocating for HOA accountability. What began as one man's fight to reclaim his backyard had turned into a beacon of hope for homeowners everywhere, proof that even in the face of abuse and power, truth and persistence can prevail.